above true horror story.
Until recently, I lived with my parents in a small house just outside the city. They were always strict and stubborn, which meant we rarely had guests over. The only friend of mine they ever managed to get along with, even just a little, was Luke. I'd known him since first grade, and he was probably the only person I could turn to in a tough spot. Unlike my parents, who would rather scold me for my mistakes than teach me how not to make them, Luke was always ready to lend a hand or offer advice. He had far more life experience than I did. He grew up without a father. He started working at 14 and still managed to go out with girls. I couldn't help but admire him, though not out of envy. I was genuinely happy for his success in every area of his life. But not everything went his way. His mom was an alcoholic. She spent half of the child support on booze, leaving the rest to buy Luke some food. Still, he had something I didn't have growing up: freedom. A year after he turned 18, his mom passed away. He inherited the apartment she had lived in. Last week, he came over to visit me in the evening. My parents had gone out to a play, so the house was ours for the next 3 hours. We didn't even think about throwing a party. We both knew how that could end. Hosting anything at Luke's apartment didn't make sense either. Even at 19, my dad was dead set against me staying overnight anywhere but home. So when Luke suggested I buy a cheap apartment on the edge of town, I found myself surprisingly intrigued. My parents weren't stingy with my allowance, and I was good at saving, setting most of it aside for a rainy day. I doubt I could afford a decent place with what I've got, I said. You can, Luke replied with a grin. Not just decent, but brand new, like something in one of those new complexes, I said, laughing. My tone wasn't exactly hopeful. I'm serious, Luke said firmly. I've got it all figured out. One of our neighbors did the same thing, and now he's living the dream. Your savings are more than enough for a place in an older building on the outskirts. He went on to explain. The apartment building, built back in the 70s, had a cracked foundation, mold issues, and broken heating. The place had been declared unsafe, and the city planned to demolish it. Residents would be relocated to brand new developments. You want me to live in a dump that could collapse at any moment? I asked, unimpressed. Oh, stop it, Luke shot back. You'll be there less than a month, it won't fall apart, and you'll get a new apartment for free. How's that for motivation? I told him I'd think about it, then give him my decision the next day. I had to discuss it with my parents and prepare myself for the possibility of making a big purchase. It was a long conversation. I laid out countless arguments in favor of the idea and explained Luke's plans several times. Eventually, my mom came around. My dad, likely just wanting me to leave him alone, agreed too. That was all I needed. The next day, I met up with Luke. He showed me an online listing he'd found recently. The asking price was slightly less than what I had saved. The seller turned out to be a reasonable young guy, only a few years older than us. The apartment had belonged to a grandmother he barely knew, so he had no sentimental attachment, and listed it for sale almost immediately after inheriting it. The apartment was on the 4th floor. Its steel doors stood out against the scratched and graffiti-covered walls in the hallway, but the view inside wasn't much better. The smell was unforgettable, like the local alley cats had made this their clubhouse. The wallpaper was peeling in several places, and a single dim bulb hung where the hallway light fixture should have been. The kitchen window was cracked at the bottom corner. Thankfully, it was summer, so staying here for a couple of weeks wouldn't mean freezing to death. The living room had a balcony, an ancient TV, and a couch, the very one the old lady had died on. We immediately covered it with a sheet. Neither of us was particularly superstitious, but sitting where someone had passed away didn't feel right. The second room had a wardrobe, a bed, and a nightstand. "Well, it's livable," Luke said with a grin. "Maybe I could stay with you," I asked, trying to think of alternatives. The apartment was technically mine, so I'd still be eligible for the relocation no matter where I stayed. "Here's the thing," Luke hesitated. "You remember Liz from the class next door?" It all made sense. So, this was going to be my home. At least it had basic amenities, and the steel door provided some security from the outside world. Going back to stay with my parents wasn't an option. It would have crushed my pride, and I didn't want to see my dad's disappointed face. By evening, we moved my stuff from home, and Luke headed back to his place. For dinner, all I had was tap water, so I decided to walk to the store. The building was somewhat isolated from others, making the trip to the nearest shop a bit of a trek. When I returned, it was dark and the street lights had come on. Near my building's entrance, I spotted a shadowy figure. Hesitating for a moment, I decided to approach. "Who are you?" a woman's voice asked as I neared the shadowy figure. "I live here," I replied, turning away from the building's entrance. The figure stubbed out her cigarette and stepped closer. It was a woman, petite, middle-aged, and surprisingly well-preserved, though her voice carried the rough rasp of a lifelong smoker. "Lydia," she said, extending her hand. "Mike," I replied, shaking it. "How long you been here, Mike?" "Just moved in today. And you?" "All my life." Her voice hardened as she continued, "And I'm not going anywhere. The suits think they can kick us out like trash, promise us shiny new apartments, but we'll be lucky to get a bunk in some run-down shelter." She took another drag from her cigarette. "Not me. I'll stay here even if that crack in the wall splits the whole building in half." "Are there many people still living here?" I asked, more out of politeness than curiosity. "Not really, just me and Boris Anderson. He used to be in the Navy, got this apartment for his service. Lost his daughter and her family in a car accident years ago. Now he's all alone, living up on the 5th floor." We chatted a bit longer before a second figure emerged from the shadows of the courtyard. His posture was upright, his stride firm, but a noticeable limp and labored breathing marked him as an older man. "Meet Boris Anderson," Lydia nodded toward the silhouette. As he stepped into the light, I saw a gray-haired man with a somber expression and a thick mustache. I offered him my hand, but he didn't take it. His eyes were troubled, filled with an unease I couldn't quite place. I decided not to press him about it. "Don't open the door at night," he warned, his voice firm. "The door?" I asked, confused, but he didn't elaborate. Instead, he hurried up the stairs, his limp more pronounced with each step. Lydia and I exchanged puzzled glances, but there were no answers. Eventually, we both went our separate ways. The old man's warning lingered in my mind. That night, I made sure to lock the heavy metal door with every bolt and even secured my bedroom door with a flimsy latch. Sleep didn't come easily, my thoughts restless, replaying the encounter with Boris and the strange tension he carried. Probably just senility, I told myself, trying to dismiss it. But in the dead of night, a loud noise woke me, a heavy thud from the apartment above. It sounded like something massive being dragged across the floor, followed by slow, deliberate footsteps. Then another crash, and finally the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. My heart raced. Grabbing my watch strap, I wrapped it against the radiator pipe, hoping the noise would stop. And it did. The rest of the night passed in silence, though I barely slept. The next morning, as I left for class, I ran into Lydia by the entrance. Trying to sound casual, I asked, "What's upstairs for me?" She smirked. Oh, that's just Boris Anderson. He's got a little case of late-stage furniture rearranging syndrome. Her tone was light, but her words left a sour taste in my mouth. Later that day, I hung out with my friend Luke and met his girlfriend, Lisa. I stayed at their place until evening, not eager to return home, but as I approached the building under the streetlights, there she was again, Lydia, standing by the entrance. "How's your day, Lydia?" I smiled at her, but she didn't respond. Instead, she stared at me with wide, frightened eyes. "Something wrong?" I asked. "Mike," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I don't know. I just got back from work. I was standing here, smoking, and then I looked up at my window and the light was on, and then, just as suddenly, it turned off again." She swallowed hard. "You think someone's in there?" "Come on," I said with a faint smile. "This building's older than both of us combined. It's probably just faulty wiring. Want me to check it out?" "If it's not too much trouble, Mike," she said, handing me her keys with a shaky hand. Looking back, I cursed myself for agreeing. But it was too late to back out now. I had a small can of pepper spray in my pocket, which gave me a little courage. The door to her apartment was locked. My hands trembled as I turned the key, flipping on the light as quickly as I could. No one. I checked the kitchen, then the living room and bedroom, all empty. I didn't feel like going back downstairs, so I leaned out the window and called to Lydia, letting her know the coast was clear. She beamed up at me and quickly came inside. She offered me tea and some company, but I politely declined and headed to my own place. An hour later, I was in my room, watching a show on my laptop. The window was open, letting in the sounds of the night. Mutterings of drunk passers-by, the hum of distant traffic. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air, a woman's voice, sharp and terrified. I jumped to my feet and rushed to the window, but the street below was empty. Then it came again, clearer this time, and I realized the scream was coming from inside the building. My stomach dropped. My mind raced, trying to piece it all together. Lydia. It had to be her. My thoughts spiraled. Could it be her husband? An ex? Did she even have a husband? She was 40, single as far as I knew. Was it something else entirely? Then, a horrifying realization hit me. I hadn't checked her bathroom. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone. I crouched behind the curtains, watching the front entrance like a hawk, ready to report anything I saw to the police. When the dispatcher said officers were on their way, I felt a shred of relief. The police car pulled up within 10 minutes, but in that time no one had left the building. 3 officers rushed inside. 1 officer remained outside, and I waved to him, pointing out the apartment number where I lived. Soon there was a knock at my door. 2 detectives stood there, asking to hear my account of the events. After I told them everything, they invited me into the neighboring apartment. Inside, the scene was horrifying. Ludmilla's body was lying in the bathroom. A trail of blood led from the tub to the kitchen window, as if she'd been trying to call for help or escape. The cause of death couldn't be determined on sight. There were no visible wounds, but blood had poured from her mouth and her fingernails were broken, as if she had desperately fought someone before dying. The police said they had to force the door open, which meant the perpetrator had access to the apartment. The detective theorized that the killer might have fled through the attic and exited via another stairwell that led toward the woods behind the building, far from my window. Staying alone that night felt unbearable. I called my friend Luke and begged him to come over. He wasn't thrilled about it, but since his girlfriend Lisa wasn't staying with him that night, he agreed. When he arrived, I refrained from telling him anything about the old man upstairs. What was the point? The police wouldn't believe me if I told them he was involved. I figured they'd just end up interrogating him about moving furniture and leave it at that. The night went on as usual until around 4 a.m. That's when I heard the familiar noise, a faint voice followed by loud bangs, something glass shattering and heavy stomping, as though the man was jumping around in his apartment. 5 minutes later, it all stopped. Exhausted, I managed to fall back asleep. The next morning, Luke complained about his miserable night. "Not only did you make me sleep on the floor, dude," he said, "but some lunatic kept waking me up with his stomping." I chuckled. "Yeah, that's my upstairs neighbor. Crazy old man." Luke stared at me in disbelief. "Wait, you're telling me there's some psycho living above you and you dragged me here to stay the night? What if he's the one who killed that woman?" The thought hit me like a freight train. My imagination spiraled. The old man creeping down to her apartment, hiding in her bathroom, waiting for her to come home, defenseless after a long day at work. "Cut it out," I said nervously. "The guy can barely breathe, let alone murder someone." The day passed quickly, with only 2 classes at school. When I got home, I saw Lydia's brother leaving her apartment. We exchanged a few words, and he explained that she'd never had a family of her own. No husband, no kids. She'd always been alone. He lived in another city and had come only to take care of her funeral arrangements. I spent the rest of the day watching TV, feeling a strange heaviness in the air. I went to bed early, but the familiar noise returned that night, louder and more frantic than ever. It sounded like someone was trying to stomp right through the floor. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. Luke's words replayed in my head. Could the old man really be capable of such a thing? I decided to call the police. When they arrived an hour later, they weren't pleased that I hadn't told them about the upstairs neighbor earlier. They even threatened me with charges for withholding information. After hearing about my suspicions, the lead detective decided to question the old man immediately. They brought me along as a witness. We knocked on his door repeatedly, but there was no answer. Eventually, the detective ordered the door to be broken down. Inside, the apartment was tidy, with family portraits on the walls, but no sign of the old man. The bedroom door was locked. After another forced entry, we found him. Boris was slumped in a chair, facing a large mirror. His pale, emaciated body looked lifeless, surrounded by tufts of white hair that had been either ripped from his scalp or fallen out. Blood-stained shards of glass littered the floor. His eyes were open, staring directly into the mirror. They were fixed on the reflection of the door, on us. The detective called for an ambulance, and Boris was taken away. I stayed home, too shaken to go to school. I called Luke, but he didn't pick up. The loneliness and fear were overwhelming. That night, I locked all the doors and windows, leaving a light on as I crawled into bed. Sleep came fitfully. At dawn, I woke to the sound of heavy stomping upstairs. My heart sank. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. I called the police again. They arrived quickly and searched the old man's apartment, but found nothing. By now, I'd had enough. I grabbed my laptop, wallet, and passport, ready to leave for good. A police officer stayed with me as I packed, and I realized I couldn't find my cell phone. I used the landline, something I'd never done before, to call it. On the way to Luke's, the detective told me they'd found out something chilling. Boris had been dead for at least 3 days. He'd died the same day he warned me not to open the door at night. I've been staying at Luke's ever since, waiting for the building to be demolished. Recently, though, I noticed a missed call from my old apartment's landline. I threw away my SIM card, phone, and everything connected to that place. But no matter what I do, I can't shake the feeling that it's not over. I left my phone behind. It's not my problem anymore. Some things are better left unanswered. Smash that like button if you got scared, and leave a comment telling us which moment gave you chills. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not afraid. Choose one of the 2 videos on the screen to test your nerves. Boo!